Welcome to Outside Ourselves, a podcast featuring conversations that remind us faith isn't something we do, it's something we receive. I'm Kelsi, and today I am so excited to be chatting with my good friend, Dr. Dan Van Voorhis, about the history of Christmas. In today's episode, we go through everything from the history of Santa Claus to the history of the tension we sometimes see between the secular and Christianity when it comes to Christmas practices and traditions. I learned a ton in this conversation, and I think you will too. I hope that you enjoy this lighthearted and joyful episode as we continue to close out the year and prepare for the birth of Jesus. Enjoy and Merry Christmas. Dan, welcome to the show. It's good to see you. I know I'm going to see you in person in a couple of days, but thanks so much for joining us today on this special Christmas episode.
Hooray. Hooray. Kelsi, absolutely so happy to be on this episode with you. So happy that my reputation would be such that you would think Christmas episode and Dan Van Voorhis, it's something I've been working on for decades, just developing this reputation as the Christmas guy. So I am delighted to be here.
You are the Christmas guy for sure. So this is the pinnacle right here. You're here to talk about Christmas.
All the work I've done to try to get people to know that I'm the Christmas guy in a way that is neither ironic or cynical. I just love Christmas. So happy to talk about it and its history and all kinds of things on today's show.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in. Before we get started, tell us a little bit about who you are. I think if people are familiar with 1517, they will know your name and a little bit of your work. But for those who might not be so familiar with 1517 as an organization,
sure.
Tell us who you are, what you do, that kind of stuff.
Dan Van Voorhis. I'm a California native, Orange County, where I live with my wife and two sons, 10 and 13 now. I went to Concordia University in Irvine after an interesting childhood, and then moved to Scotland, where I got my PhD in history. I came back to Concordia University in Irvine, where I taught in the history department and was the department chair and assistant dean. I did that for 10 years. And then in 2016, 1517 hired me full-time to be a scholar in residence. And since 2019, I've done a daily podcast called the Christian History Almanac. It's a 6 to 8 minute show where I give you a sort of on this day, tell you a story about a person or an idea or event in the Christian church. And then on the weekends, a brand new thing we've been doing for this past year, it's called the Weekend Edition. And that's when we go 30 to 45 minutes and I just take a topic that I like. It can be a biography, it can be an event. And in the case of the show I'm working on right now, it's Christmas songs. So it dovetails nice with what we're doing here on this podcast. So that's what I'm a historian and a podcaster and a scholar in residence here at 1517.
Awesome. Well, you already claimed that you are the Christmas guy, which
yes.
I validated is true. Can you tell us why exactly you love Christmas so much? What is it about this season that you love?
Oh, there's a lot of things I mentioned before. I'm right in between Gen X and millennial. I probably am a little more Gen X than millennial. And it seems like my generation is so cynical and so ironic and can't just sort of love something for the sake of loving something in a heart on your sleeve kind of way. And Christmas is the one time when I think we do have that opportunity to just to put lights on our houses and to have a canon of music that we all listen to together. And I've got this quote from A Christmas Carol. This is the cousin of Scrooge. He says, "I've always thought of Christmas time as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time when men and women seem by one consent to open up their shut-up hearts freely and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys." And so it's that joy. And it's the one place where I feel like there's almost a truce in the sacred secular battle. And I know people want to make a war on Christmas and the like. I'll leave that aside. But I love walking through what we call Ralph's and you call Kroger. And I'm hearing peace on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled, like as I'm buying my soup.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, right? The radio is
Right.
talking about the incarnation and God come down, and the hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. So it not only is a time of just kind of cultural joy and light, but it is oftentimes as explicitly Christian as we get. And
Yeah.
while I'm comfortable with the sacred secular divide in our country, I love the sort of both parts of me, the sort of sacred fun and the secular fun come together. So that's how I got, amongst my friends and then students and faculty at the college, the reputation as being the Christmas guy, because I appreciate all of it, secular, sacred, and where it comes together.
Yeah, there is definitely like a bleeding over from sacred to secular at this
Mm-hmm.
time of year, but there's also a lot of tension
Mm-hmm.
between those two, because we do see that bleeding over, and I think it's really beautiful, and I love your perspective on it. But we also have, there's a lot of American Christians that are up in arms about saying happy holidays and things like that, which is interesting, right? Like, I don't know, there's kind of like this tug of war going on there. How do we navigate that?
Mm-hmm.
And then a second really big question is, where does that come from? Is there some historical background to that kind of animosity between how Christians view the secularization of
Yeah.
Christmas?
Well, so first, how we handle it. I would hope that as Christians and, here at 1517, we like to emphasize grace in what we do. I think we should be gracious. And part of being gracious and neighborly is not trying to shove anything down someone's throat, and also appreciating,
Yeah.
other people's boundaries. So if someone
Yeah.
is uncomfortable with Merry Christmas, I'll say Happy Holidays. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. I'm not upset about that. If Starbucks wants to emphasize candy cane more than Christmas, or just the color red, um, that's fine. I'm not promised anything. I'm not promised that my culture will be Christian.
Yeah.
And America is not a Christian nation. You can actually go on YouTube and search 1517 Is America a Christian Nation? And there's a little 7-minute video that I did with some of you folks in Dallas,
Yeah.
where I try to explain exactly why we're not a Christian nation. We're certainly influenced by Christianity. We have been a majority. And so sometimes we felt like it's ours because,
Yeah.
the country is a majority Christian. That's becoming less and less the case, right? We're
Hmm.
at like high 50s, low 60s of the percent of people calling
Yeah.
themselves Christians.
Right.
So that's one thing to remember, to be gracious, to realize not everyone celebrates, and that's fine.
Hmm.
But there are some really fun things about it. And so even if I can get my neighbor into just decorating, maybe they'll have some joy there, and they'll see some of my joy and ask, hey, why is this such a big deal? And I can
Mm.
get to the incarnation at the heart of it. But like I said, I'm not promised a Christian culture. So a war on Christmas, I'm going to stay out of, and I think we could do well to do that as well. As
Yeah.
far as the issue with Christmas has, interestingly, in our deeper past, our sort of colonial past, has actually been a problem with Puritans and Protestants. And
Okay.
Puritans and Protestants who don't want to celebrate Christmas because Christmas is a festival season. Christmas is a holy day, and part of it revolves around a saint, right? Saint Nicholas of Myra. And
Mm.
so from the Reformation and then into the colonies, you have a number of people saying, do not celebrate Christmas. That is a
Hmm.
sort of Catholic papal thing of our past. And
Okay.
so in Massachusetts, for instance, you would be fined if you went to church on Christmas.
Oh, wow.
And there were times where, like this coming year, Christmas would come on a Sunday and they wouldn't have, the Puritans would say, no church on Christmas. We'll have it the next day. We're serious about this. Christmas is papal and superstitious. So, the war on Christmas started with uptight Christians saying Christmas was no good. Ironic, we've come full circle now, and the war on Christmas is supposedly the sort of secular ones. So that's always been the case. Up through, there have been times where the sort of Christian culture has ebbed and flowed. I can think of times in the early 20th century when the number of confessing Christians was quite low. This is pre-World War II.
Yeah.
You're going to have a sort of push for the sort of secular marketplace and Santa, over Jesus. But then coming out of the World War II, we have a big bump in Christian identity. And we can see this in, think of one of my favorites, The Charlie Brown Christmas.
Right.
When Linus steps out on the stage and just reads from the Gospel of Luke and says, that's what Christmas is all about. That was on CBS, primetime television. As many people watch that as watch major sporting events. And there weren't complaints. There really weren't. There were a few organizations for separation of church and state that tried to get campaigns going, but no one cared. It was fine. So it's important to know it's always ebbed and flowed. And sometimes it's been Christians fighting against Christmas, and sometimes it's been secular people fighting against Christmas. But I think if we can find that happy medium where we can, embrace the secular and the sacred together, we have a better chance of being able to use it as an opportunity to talk about the sacred with people without, making them listen to us.
Yeah. Wow. That's really fascinating. What would you say is the reason in your mind to celebrate Christmas, even if it started as, we're both Protestants? Why should Protestants celebrate this very Catholic festival and feast day? What's the reason for us to maintain that?
Freedom in Christ. That's the answer. I'm thinking of Paul in Romans 14. I'm thinking about Paul talking about some people are going to celebrate days and other people aren't. And as soon as it becomes a law, then run away. As soon as it becomes a you have to, then run away. But if it becomes a you get to, I find it fascinating that Christmas and Easter, it's not uncommon for Protestants, evangelicals. Of course, Lutherans and Anglicans are going to follow the church calendar. Other Protestants don't, except for Christmas and Easter. It's all of a sudden we're on the church calendar. All of a sudden we've got Advent and Christmas and Lent and Easter, because we recognize that the incarnation and the resurrection are really cool to give special time for. It's the reason why there's a church calendar at all. And so I think that it's a fun thing that our sort of Puritan forefathers, the colonial ones, that we kind of won them over and said, hey, this is fun to do. Like I said, when it becomes a law, then there are people who get really upset if during Advent you're listening to Christmas music. And okay, if you don't, you do what you will. But as soon as people start talking like that, then I think, whoa, we've just made this into a law. That's no fun.
Yeah.
So
is there Advent music? Is there such a thing
there
as
is.
Advent?
There is. Yeah.
Is there really?
But you'd think of a lot of them as Christmas songs.
Christmas. Okay.
So, okay, let's go. O come, Emmanuel is an Advent song.
Okay.
Let all mortal flesh keep silence. Of the Father's heart begotten. Hark, a thrilling voice is sounding. Lo, he comes with clouds descending. So these are hymns that focus on the first and second coming of Jesus, oftentimes juxtaposing the first and second. And if you've got a hymnal that's got the church calendar, you'll see it's got Advent and then Christmas. But I always like when it's, if you can only sing Hark the Herald Angels Sing for like one Sunday, that's lame, man. It's the best. So play with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I mean, we're running a Christmas article series right now and it's
Yeah,
Advent. So what
fantastic.
are you going to do? What are you going to
Yeah.
do? That's all really great. I like what you said about once it becomes a law, be careful. And I think one thing in particular where that happens very um commonly for Christians is Santa Claus.
Mm,
I didn't realize how, because I grew up with Santa and I grew up a Christian, and I didn't realize how controversial Santa Claus was until I had kids.
mhm.
Because a lot of people really get up in arms about Santa Claus and celebrating. Can you walk us through a little bit of the history of Santa Claus? Obviously, it's gonna, I know, dovetail with just the history of Christmas in general.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
um, and then I want to hear if you think Christians should celebrate Santa Claus or should not.
All right. So Santa Claus, as we understand him, as good 21st century Americans, took a long time to get that name, to get jolly and chubby and white bearded and with reindeer. It's a long historical process that takes sort of different turns in different countries. So the main sort of agreement is that we've got a guy called Nicholas of Myra, and he is going to be living in the 300s in Turkey, modern day Turkey, and he's an orphan, and he's adopted by his uncle, who is a bishop, the Bishop of Myra. And Nicholas is known for his generosity, and at some point hears that his neighbor doesn't have money to marry off his daughters.
Hmm.
And so Nicholas, perhaps through a chimney or perhaps just through the window, gives the money to the father
Hmm.
secretly so that he can marry off his daughters. People start hearing about this, and little kids get excited and start leaving their shoes out, hoping that they too can get money from this Nicholas, who would go on to become himself the Bishop of Myra. We don't know much about him historically. Of course, that's just the legend. We do know that Nicholas of Myra was at the Council of Nicaea in
Okay.
325. That's that big council where the two natures of Christ are kind of laid out for the first time.
Yeah.
It's where we get the Nicene Creed. You'll see a meme sometimes of St. Nicholas punching Arius, the heretic.
Yeah.
That didn't happen, but it's something I see every Christmas because Nicholas was um, at the council. He very quickly after his death became associated with children and with sailors. And so he was the patron saint of children and the patron saint of sailors. Many sailors would pray to Saint Nicholas as praying to the saints became a thing. He's who
Why
you would.
was he associated with sailors? What was the
Um,
connection?
yeah, that's a good question. Because he lived near the Black Sea, because
Okay.
he was said to travel when he gave his gifts. So obviously
Okay.
he knew the terrain such that he could
Yeah.
get around. And so he became very popular, a very popular saint. Um, Historians, we can trace the popularity of saints by finding little badges and icons with people and in their house inventories. And so we see that
Oh,
Nicholas
yeah.
was really popular in Turkey and then into Western Europe.
Interesting.
So he becomes associated with, his feast day, which is December 6th. So
Okay.
sometimes, like in Germany, you celebrate Christmas um, on December 6th. That's the day when you celebrate. And so he was Saint Nicholas. Now his in Dutch he would become known as Sinterklaas, which would become Santa Claus with
Mm-hmm.
Dutch immigrants in America. The 16th century, as I mentioned before, the Reformation didn't want a feast for Christmas, and they didn't want anything for a saint. And so we start to see the secular take hold in some ways.
Hmm.
And so gift giving is kind of associated as kind of a pagan ritual. And December 6th will be, the sort of the Christkind will come instead of Santa.
Okay.
The Christ child will come
Yeah.
and give presents. And then for the 25th or later on, that's when you get someone like Krampus. and Krampus is going to, he's going to beat you if you're naughty.
Oh my
And
gosh.
he's sort of the bad part, or he'll kidnap you. He's oftentimes got long like branches. And then, of course, it's not too long before the Christkind or the Christ child starts doing battle with Krampus. And so now we've got this just weird pagan Christian conglomeration.
Krampus is
So
the perfect like Christmas villain name.
yeah. Krampus is, there have been a number of
Bad
movies
guy.
about Krampus
Okay.
that are never good. They're never good. I have a theory because we don't want to be scared. We don't want to, like, it's something that, especially in American Christmas, we don't have the binary.
Yeah.
We have Santa, and he knows if we've been good or bad, so be good for goodness sake. But, you know, in the Netherlands, if you're bad, the story is that Santa's helpers are going to put you in a bag and beat you up, and they might kidnap you and take you to Spain. It's a
terrifying.
story little Dutch children have to deal with. I'm very glad we don't have that.
Yeah, me too.
You know, I mean, Santa being able to see us all the time is kind of weird, but we
Yeah,
don't have
it's
that
true.
that sort of binary. So it's really the bringing together of the sacred and the secular, as I mentioned, where we start to find December 25th being accepted as Christ's birthday, and that then being associated with St. Nicholas amongst Protestants in America. It's the Dutch in America, who were always a little, you know, not Puritan, that start having these celebrations on Christmas with Santa Claus, who brings you presents. And it was Washington Irving. He's the guy who wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and the story of Rip Van Winkle. He tells the story of Santa Claus that he heard from the Knickerbocker Dutch, the people I'm descended from in New York. And so we get that, and then we get Clement Clark Moore a couple decades later, and he writes a poem for his children, and it's A Night Before Christmas. Okay. And so that's where we start to hear about Rudolph the reindeer. Rudolph comes later, but we hear about the reindeer.
Yeah.
Thomas Nast, who was the most famous cartoonist in America, took a take on Santa Claus, and that was used everywhere. And then Macy's, which did the Macy's parade, Christmas parade that had Santa, and Coca-Cola both used Thomas Nast's picture of the guy we think of Santa Claus today. So as I said, the Santa Claus we have today is a particularly American Santa Claus that comes from 19th century America.
And what decade was that? Sorry to interrupt. What decade was that when Coca-Cola and Macy's took?
So these are the early 1900s. So 1910s, 1920s is when we start, as I mentioned before, a sort of secular appropriation of the holiday during that time in America. So that's the brief history of our Santa Claus. He's going to look different in other places, sometimes celebrated on his day, December 6th, sometimes telescoped together with the 25th. So I used to work at the college, as I mentioned, and a lot of us there had kids. And like you mentioned, what to do with Santa Claus, I never thought of it as an issue at all. Like Santa Claus, fantastic. He comes down the chimney. He gives us presents. My parents told us it was true. And then when they said it wasn't true, we asked if it really was true. They said, no. But it was huge. It was a gigantic issue with other professors and their kids. I have no problem with people doing what they want to do. Right. There's not like, what's harmful? Am I lying to my child? Yes and no. I remember with both of my sons, my oldest Court, he was, probably 7 or 8. And he said, is Santa real? Like real? And we said, no, it's a story we tell. It's a myth we play up around the holidays.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, okay. That's what I thought. And my youngest, it was spoiled by a neighborhood kid. And so that was a bummer. But I think this is an issue of Christian freedom. I think
Yeah.
this is, if you're uncomfortable telling the story, then don't tell it. But Kelsi, you've got kids now. You know how like everyone wants to tell everyone how to raise their kids, and
Right.
I just I really think this is something to be left to the individual parent.
Yeah. I agree with you. It was kind of a trick question, but I I think that there's freedom there, and I do think it's easy to get up in arms about, though, because however you were raised, I mean, not for everybody, but for a lot of people, they want to mimic that for their kids. So they think like, oh, if they're raised a different way, like if I celebrated Santa and I don't want to do that for my kids, are they going to miss out? And then vice versa. So, but I think it's a good reminder in that case that there's really not a wrong way to do it. And as far
Yeah,
as,
yeah.
yeah, no, go ahead.
Oh, just as far as traditions go, I mean, sometimes it's not a theological issue. It's just like, as you mentioned, it's
Yeah.
I did this as a kid. I want this done this way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my wife Beth Ann, who we had a little battle when we first got married because for me, Christmas is garish. Christmas is bright, multicolored lights everywhere. It's an overstuffed tree. It's silly things pinned all over the walls. Where for her mom, it was like all white lights.
Yeah.
And then the tree would just have like purple bows on them, no like fun wooden ornaments.
Yeah.
And so that's it was her tradition. And so she's like, yeah,
Yes.
but I kind of like that. Um, and then she came over to the my side, which was gracious of her. But yeah, I think sometimes when we talk about Santa, we make it maybe a theological issue when it's really just a tradition issue. If you didn't
Yeah.
grow up with it, you don't want other people to have that fun. Or I hear people saying, well, but then if you say that Santa's real and then he's not, what if they think Jesus is real and then he's
Right.
not? um, let's do a little better. Just you're talking about Jesus more than you're talking about Santa Claus, and
Yeah.
in a different way. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think freedom is the name of the game there.
The key there. You obviously know a lot about Christmas traditions
Mhm.
worldwide and throughout history. Do you have any favorites that you've learned about, or maybe that you guys even, I don't know if you practice global Christmas traditions. Maybe you do, but
Yeah, I
anything that,
do. Yeah.
okay.
Okay. So there's a couple ones. I actually wrote. I forget where I wrote it. Maybe it was even 15, 17
I
years and
think,
years ago. And I wrote
yeah,
about the Tio de Nadal,
yes. That's
which
why I've asked
is
this question because
yes,
I remember this
it's
article.
it's it's the poop log.
Yeah.
It's popular in Spain, and it's a hollow log that you decorate with a face on one side, and then you cover with blankets. And from the feast of what is the feast day? I forget. It's December 8th, but starting December 8th, you feed the log various things, and you put it into its hollowed out mouth,
Okay.
and then you do this until the 24th, until Christmas Eve, and then there's a little song. And I wrote down the lyrics to the song. It goes, poop log, poop nuggets, hazelnuts, and matto cheese. If you don't poop well, I'll hit you with a stick. Poop log. And then on Christmas morning, you take the blanket away, and all the presents are there. They came from the log that you've been feeding treats for the past
I'm
month.
dying.
So that's the Tio de Nadal. I will mention any Catalonians will know that I use the word poop, but that's not quite the word they use. But it's a family show. Uh, in Japan, they associate Christmas with Kentucky Fried Chicken,
Okay.
and so there is you get on a waiting list to get Kentucky Fried Chicken on Christmas Day because Christmas is so associated with American culture. And
Amazing.
KFC is so associated with American culture that's all they don't celebrate Christmas. They just get, KFC. There's a story often told of a display in Tokyo of a crucified Santa Claus. So really mixing the signals here.
Yeah.
um, but just kind of a funny the Japanese liking American culture in a way that we kind of ape
Yeah.
Japanese culture sometimes,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So that's a good one. In Italy, Santa doesn't bring you presents, but La Befana does.
Okay.
La Befana is a witch, and she was cursed when she was invited by the Magi to go see the baby Jesus, and she declined. And part of her punishment for perpetuity is giving gifts to people around the Nativity. So that's an Italian one. I was surprised.
She's not a very generous giver then, probably, if she's cursed to give, right? Does
Yeah,
she enjoy her job?
I don't. She doesn't look like she enjoys it from the pictures I've seen. She looks like a cursed witch, but apparently she does bring. She
Joy?
brings good gifts. Yeah,
Okay.
and
All
it's
right.
funny, as I mentioned. There's this. There's a long tradition of Christmas and ghost stories.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of the. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Dun, 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 dun. There's a line in there about ghost stories, and oftentimes people kind of, if you listen, you're like, well, when did ghost
Yeah.
stories become part of Christmas?
Yeah.
But that's part of the sort of pagan culture of a coming winter, right? Winter coming mid-December, witches, demons, Krampus, as I mentioned.
Krampus.
Um, so it's really it is this sort of brightness and celebration, but also a fixation on the other side of that. Something
Mm.
that in American culture we kind of got away with, we got rid of, which I think makes for a
Mhm.
better secular holiday, but really does follow Christmas in other parts of the world. So
Hmm.
those are some. And then I learned personally when I lived in Scotland that bringing coal is actually a good thing, and you bring coal to a
Oh,
Christmas party
interesting.
because it's cold, and coal, helps heat the house. So coal being a bad thing is an American invention.
Very interesting. I just learned like 25 new facts that I did not know before.
It's what I'm good for. I put facts in my head and then spit them out into a microphone.
I love it. I love it. You were talking about how the like ghost stories and kind of this dark side following Christmas, which I mean, like you said, we've kind of gotten away from in America in general, but there's kind of like something there that gets at the heart of the Christian Christmas story, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I don't know if they're associated in any way or it's just kind of coincidence, but
Well, this is a time of year where for many people, it's a tough time of year.
yeah,
It's a tough time of year because it's darker.
yeah,
It's a tough time of year because if you don't have family, if you don't have traditions, and you hear people getting on about how wonderful, a goof like me talking about how great everything is,
yeah.
and you're depressed, it can be a tough time. Um, as far as the dating of why we celebrate Christmas in December 25th, there are many, many theories. Was it to replace a pagan Roman holiday? Likely. Was it because the Annunciation takes place, 9 months prior? Well, in some calendars it does, in some calendars it doesn't. But there's a human urge, and we find this in world religions and in Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
to paradoxically celebrate when it's darkest.
Mm,
A way to say n- no, no
yeah.
to the evil, to say no to the darkness, and to say we're going to put the coming of the Son of God, coming of light, in the darkest hour.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know what the weather was like in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago, but you know shepherds out at night in December probably isn't going to be the case. It's going to be a little too cold for that, but nonetheless, we've decided we're going to put it here. We're going to put it in winter to celebrate the brightest thing in our
Yeah.
faith. And so that we just see this in the fancy word for it would be Manichaean.
Mm,
Manichaean was an old philosophy that saw everything in dualities between light and darkness, and it's just something that's in us. And so I think as Christians we do well to talk about the triumph of good and the triumph of God in the midst of darkness.
Yeah.
It's why while I talk about the joy and all that, I do like some of the melancholy aspects of Christmas.
Yeah.
Um, my favorite Christmas song, not hymn, is "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas."
Okay.
And this song comes from a musical called Meet Me in St. Louis. It's not a Christmas musical. And this song comes when Judy Garland and her sisters realize they're going to be moving away from their family or moving away from their friends. And so if you have the right version of the song, there's a lyric that goes, in the end, we all will be together if the fates allow. Until then, we'll have to muddle through somehow. Now, it was Frank Sinatra who said, I don't want that sad sack language. So he rewrote it to hang a shining star upon the highest bough instead of until then we'll have to muddle through somehow.
Huh.
So when you listen for that song, see if that lyric is there.
Yeah.
And then if you listen to, say, James Taylor's most recent edition or the Kenton Cobblers Club, which is my favorite, there is this sort of underlying sadness but hope.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that's a wonderful way we can talk in terms of the realities of sin and the joy of the holiday and of the incarnation and the coming of God in human flesh. So I do think there is a place for that duality in the Christian faith and in Christmas.
Yeah, I think that's so important to maintain as Christians. If we're going to talk about like how you should celebrate, or we don't want to get too prescriptive, but that's a good thing to cherish is that duality, and that the fact that there is darkness, and yet we have the hope and the promise of light that comes to eradicate that. I think that's really, really important. I know you I was looking at what you had written about Christmas, and you, in one article you talked about in A Charlie Brown Christmas too, where it ends on a high note, but at the beginning Charlie is it Charlie or is it Linus that's sad?
Charlie's, yeah.
Yes, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And he's depressed because he doesn't feel like it's Christmas, right? Which is kind of getting at this, what you're talking about, the truth that this is either like the best time of year for people or the absolute worst. And it's good to remember that, I think.
Yeah, we should always be comfortable as Christians to note that things aren't right.
Yeah.
This is the season of Advent, Advent Christmas, I like to think of it. But Advent is the season of recognizing the now and the not yet, the first coming and the second coming. Yeah. That while everything has been put right, it is not completely right until the second coming. And so, Charlie Brown in the beginning is depressed. I know of churches that have services that are called Blue Christmas services, which are designed to help people with their depression during the season. If you Google Blue Christmas, Blue Christmas service, you can probably find one near you. There are many around me. So yeah, I think we do really well to do that. I was reminded of the line in "O Little Town of Bethlehem," and in the dark street shineth the everlasting light. The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. Right? The hopes and fears of all the years. Like we can say, yeah, we have hopes and fears, but in Jesus, it's all met. So yeah.
You started talking about, you've mentioned throughout some of your favorite Christmas hymns. Are there any that you haven't mentioned that you think are worth mentioning? And then kind of what are you finding in your research for the Christian History Almanac episode on that?
So I quoted "O Little Town of Bethlehem" and "Hark the Herald Angels Sing." I love "O Holy Night" done properly. It's a hard song to sing, but if you get someone or you get a nice trumpet, to hit those high notes, there's a great line we don't always sing in "O Holy Night." This is all from memory. I didn't write these lyrics down. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in him all hostilities will cease. It's a Civil War line. It's a line about a
Oh,
divided
interesting.
America. Chain shall he break, for the slave is our brother. I wrote for 1517 a couple years ago the story of I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day,
Yeah.
which was the hymn written by Longfellow, I think.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And his wife had died, and his son went off to the Civil War, and the song starts with he doesn't want to celebrate Christmas, but the Christmas bells, bid him recognize the beauty of the promise of Jesus. So I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day is a great one. So those, I mean, I'll listen to just about any Christmas song. And like I said, I love the sacred and the secular. I am pretty particular on my versions because sometimes people, I'm trying to think of the right phrase here, give us half what they could when it comes to Christmas music. Christmas albums are just kind of like put out there. There you go. It's kid stuff, songs we all know. And then sometimes they're taken very seriously and done very well. Yeah. So Christmas songs, particular versions, some are just better than others. Sometimes they're just nostalgic. When it comes to Burl Ives or Mel Torme, my wife loves the Michael W. Smith album, Christmas.
That one's a good one. And what we were talking about Amy Grant earlier. Amy Grant's Home for Christmas. It's just the best.
She's got a Tennessee Christmas, which is her most recent, which is also very recorded at her studio with Vince Gill.
Awesome.
So those are some of the Christmas songs that I really dig.
I love it. What about Christmas movies?
Christmas movies?
What are some of your faves?
Yeah. It's why did I just go blank on the greatest movie ever made?
What's it about?
It's in black and white, and the guy wishes he was never born.
It's a Wonderful Life?
It's a Wonderful Life. Wow. Yeah. It's a Wonderful Life is perhaps the greatest movie ever made, in this man's opinion. I will watch it every year, multiple times. It is, just this story about redemption, this story about a guy's hopes and dreams, and they don't work, and it's kind of cheesy, but it's fun. And in the end, the whole town comes together for him. So that one's fantastic. I mentioned Charlie Brown Christmas. Two new ones that I really dig. One is called 8-Bit, which is on Netflix, and it's kind of like A Christmas Story, but it takes place in the 80s, and it's about a Nintendo. And then I know A Christmas Story, the You'll Shoot Your Eye Out, is not. Some people like it, some people don't. In 2017, it was made into a musical by a very talented two guys who went on to do Dear Evan Hansen and a bunch of other popular musicals. And they did the musical on live television. It's called A Christmas Story Live.
Interesting.
And so it stars Matthew Broderick and Maya Rudolph and all kinds of names, Fred Armisen, all kinds of people you might know of. And it is so we watch it every year multiple times because it's just so much fun. So, Christmas Story Live, 8-Bit, It's a Wonderful Life, A Charlie Brown Christmas. We just watched Spirited on Apple.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you like that.
We loved it. That was I love A Christmas Carol. I love all the versions. Last year, I went through and watched every version of that movie, from the oldest ones up through things like Scrooge, because I get obsessive sometimes when anyway. But Spirited was a great take on the Dickens story. So yeah, that was another one. But I watch the Hallmark movies as well. So I really don't have.
Okay.
I'll put on just
You'll
about
watch it all. Yeah.
Because the Hallmark things are so cheesy.
They're so bad.
There's one called A Castle for Christmas. I don't want to ruin it, but she gets a castle for Christmas. And in the Scottish countryside or whatever. Those are kind of cheesy. Sometimes you just put those on while you're wrapping presents or do whatever.
For sure.
But,
yeah.
But the big ones are It's a Wonderful Life, for me, and the Charlie Brown Christmas. Those are probably
Yeah.
the two big ones.
I think I have to agree with both of those. And I love A Christmas Story too, but I have not seen the musical, so I'm going to have to watch that.
Yeah, the musical I'm a musical guy. I love
Okay.
musicals, and this one's top notch. Like it's
Okay.
it's really really well, and it's live on live television,
Yeah, that's
which
amazing.
is so much fun to do something in the backlots in Hollywood.
I love it. What do you think? What is like one thing you think that people miss about Christmas? In particular, probably like the day itself. What, the reason we have Christmas that you would want to remind people about, that you think maybe gets glossed over in all of the busyness and just all the stuff that comes along with Christmas.
I'm reminded of the line from The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe of Aslan talking about the deeper magic, that there's deeper magic even still, that there's something going on, that embrace all the secular, go for it, but there's something really, really profound. And I know sometimes people say like, Jesus is the reason for the season, and it's like, yeah, it rhymes. Or happy birthday, baby Jesus. Okay, I get it. Yeah, but it's the incarnation, and the promise of a second coming. That the reason why, I mean, my neighborhood, all of our houses, we all decided just to put lights on our houses for a month.
Yeah.
And to give each other cookies and to sing songs. That's especially in these divided times, in these difficult times. What's that deeper magic? Right? I mean, why has this taken us so? And then, getting to it's the incarnation, the first coming and the second coming, and what that means for, as we talked about, the hard times, the depression, the sadness that also comes at this time. So, I don't think it can be fixed with make sure you say Merry Christmas or put the Christ in Christmas. Just so people know, when you see Xmas, that is because that's part of the Chi Rho, which is the Greek letters for Christ. So the X is just a shortage of that. So it is keeping literally Christ in Christmas. So don't be mad.
So it's fine, everybody.
But yeah, I think that that we do well to sort of highlight the deeper magic still.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And to remember that that's what, there is something there that's bringing it all together. There's a reason that, like you said, we're all going on ladders and hanging lights off of our houses, which is pretty amazing. So I think that's a great place to end. Thanks so much, Dan, for walking us through the history of Christmas.
Love to do it.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again sometime with something else. So thanks for being on.
I'm always willing to talk Christmas. Thanks, Kelsi.
Outside Ourselves is a 1517 podcast. To learn more, please go to 1517.org/podcasts. You can also learn more about all the type of work that we are doing at 1517 by visiting our website. As always, if you have enjoyed this episode, I would love if you could give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you are subscribed and are listening to podcasts. Feel free to share as well. Those are some really easy and simple ways to get the word out about Outside Ourselves. Merry Christmas, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.